It arrives not with a scream, but with a sudden, terrifying silence. You are sitting across from someone you care about, a friend, a partner, perhaps a parent. They are pouring their heart out to you, just as they always do, and you are listening just as you always have. You can feel their distress vibrating in your own chest, a heavy, familiar frequency that you have learned to carry for them. You nod, you offer comfort, you absorb their chaos to keep their world steady. But then, without warning, a switch flips deep within your psyche. The warmth in your chest evaporates, replaced instantly by a cold, metallic irritation. You look at this person, someone you love, and for a fleeting, horrifying second, you do not feel compassion. You feel revulsion. You feel a sudden, violent urge to make them stop talking, to push them away, to sever the connection entirely. The empathy that defines your existence vanishes, leaving behind a jagged, confusing rage that feels alien to your nature. You swallow it down, of course. You bury the sudden flash of hatred under a polite smile. But the guilt begins to rot you from the inside out. You ask yourself, what is wrong with me? Am I actually a narcissist in disguise? Have I been faking my kindness all this time? You retreat into isolation, terrified of your own volatility, convinced that this sudden darkness is proof of your brokenness. But you are not broken. You are experiencing a profound psychological phenomenon that Carl Jung identified nearly a century ago, a mechanism that modern neuroscience is only just beginning to map. You are not losing your mind, you are encountering the shadow's corrective reflex. This reflex is not a defect, it is a desperate biological and spiritual safety valve. To understand why you, the empath, harbor such a potent hidden reservoir of anger, we must dismantle the very definition of what you think you are. You believe your high sensitivity is a personality trait, a softness of the heart. Jung, however, viewed it through a far more analytical and archaic lens. He argued that the psyche is a self-regulating system, much like the body's homeostatic mechanisms. When the body gets too hot, it sweats. When the psyche becomes too unbalanced by the weight of others' unconscious material, it must compensate. In your case, the compensation is a violent swing into the opposite. Jung called this Enantiodromia, the tendency of things to change into their opposites, especially when one extreme is pushed too far. By identifying so strongly with the archetype of the healer, the listener, or the good person, you have inadvertently fed a darker, denser beast in the basement of your subconscious. Jung warned that the brighter the light of the persona, the mask you wear for the world, the darker and denser the shadow cast behind it. But let us ground this in the physical reality of your brain, bridging Jung's mysticism with the cold, hard facts of modern neuroscience. When you engage in deep empathy, you are not merely understanding another person intellectually. Your brain is utilizing its mirror neuron system to simulate their emotional state within your own neural pathways. You are running a high-fidelity simulation of their pain, their anxiety, and their fear in your own body. This is a metabolically expensive process. Your anterior insular and anterior cingulate cortex light up, flooding your system with the same stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, that the person venting to you is experiencing. The difference is, the trauma isn't yours. You are flooding your engine with fuel for a car that isn't moving. Over time, this leads to what I classify as neural mirroring fatigue. Your brain, recognizing that your biological resources are being depleted by a threat that isn't actually yours, intervenes. It slams the emergency brake. This is why the anger feels so sudden and so external. It is a physiological override command from your primitive brain, screaming at you to detach before you suffer systemic collapse. Jung saw this biological limit as a spiritual threshold. He believed that many who identify as empaths are actually suffering from a lack of psychological boundaries, a condition where the ego is too permeable. You absorb the collective unconsciousness of the room, the hidden grief of a stranger, the suppressed rage of a spouse, because you have not yet solidified the walls of your own fortress. You mistake this permeability for a moral virtue. You think you are helping by absorbing, but Jung would argue you are merely participating in a psychic infection. The hidden anger you feel is your psyche's immune system fighting off this infection. It is the shadow stepping in where the ego has failed. Because you refuse to consciously say no, your shadow screams no for you, often in the language of rage, resentment, or sudden icy detachment. This creates a terrifying loop. You suppress the anger because it contradicts your identity as a nice person, forcing it back into the shadow. There it festers, gaining density and pressure until it erupts again as the benevolent paradox. The moment where the person who cares the most suddenly cares the least. Consider the dynamic Jung observed in the interplay between the persona and the shadow. The persona is the face you present to the world, the accommodating, understanding, patient listener. Society rewards this. Your friends praise you for it. You're the only one who gets me, they say. This praise calcifies the persona. You become addicted to being the sanctuary for others. But the psyche demands totality, not perfection. By relentlessly polishing the good, you are actively repressing the capacity for aggression, selfishness, and assertiveness. Jung famously stated, "I would rather be whole than good." The empath's struggle is that they have chosen goodness over wholeness. The hidden anger is the wholeness knocking at the door, demanding to be let in. It is the part of you that knows your own survival matters more than someone else's comfort. When you feel that sudden flash of hatred toward a needy friend, it is not malice. It is your repressed instinct for self-preservation, clawing its way up from the abyss. To illustrate this, we must look at a specific archetype of this struggle, a case that mirrors the lives of thousands who suffer in silence. Let us speak of the devouring mother archetype, not in the literal sense of parenting, but in the energetic sense of caretaking. Jung analyzed the way extreme nurturing can transform into destruction. Imagine a patient we shall call Elias. Elias was the quintessential mediator. In his family, he was the peacekeeper. In his workplace, the emotional sponge. In his relationships, the therapist. He came to therapy not because he was angry, but because he was exhausted. He described a recurring nightmare where he was drowning in a vast, dark ocean, while people on a boat above him watched, asking him for advice on how to sail. He would wake up, gasping, filled with a nameless dread. In his waking life, Elias practiced what I call pathological availability. He believed that saying no was an act of violence. If a friend called at 2 a.m., he answered. If a partner needed reassurance for the 10th time that day, he gave it. He viewed his lack of boundaries as a testament to his strength. But in the safety of the analysis, the truth began to bleed through. Elias admitted that when his phone rang, his first micro-reaction wasn't concern. It was a flash of white-hot fury. He fantasized about throwing his phone against the wall. He caught himself looking at his needy partner with eyes that were dead and hollow. Jung would point out that Elias was possessed by the negative aspect of the helper archetype. He had become so identified with the role of the savior that he had lost contact with his own humanity. His hidden anger was actually his soul trying to break the contract he had signed with the world. The nightmare of drowning was his unconscious mind showing him the reality of his psychic economy. He was being submerged by the emotional weight of others, and his niceness was the anchor dragging him down. This brings us to the critical realization that most empaths miss. Your anger is not the enemy. Your anger is the messenger. It is the only part of you that loves you enough to fight for your existence. The neuroscience supports this duality. The same regions of the brain that process physical pain, the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, also process social rejection and the distress of others. When you over-empathize, you are literally in pain. The anger is the body's natural analgesic response, a surge of adrenaline designed to numb the pain and mobilize you to escape the source of the injury. But because you do not understand this mechanism, you pathologize it. You label your survival instinct as evil. This sets the stage for a dangerous internal fragmentation. You begin to fear your own mind. You develop the dissociative drift, where you physically remain in the room with people, nodding and smiling, but your consciousness floats away to a safe distance, watching the interaction from the ceiling. You become a ghost in your own life, trapped between the compulsion to help and the desperate need to flee. If you are nodding as you listen to this, if you feel a strange resonance in the pit of your stomach, it is because you have likely entered one of the advanced stages of this cycle without even knowing it existed. Jungian psychology allows us to map this descent. It is not a random chaos, it is a structured deterioration of the self. We can categorize this into specific phases, a diagnostic ladder that reveals exactly where you stand in the war between your persona and your shadow. There are 3 distinct stages to this phenomenon. Recognizing which stage you are currently inhabiting is the first step toward breaking the cycle before the shadow decides to break it for you. The first stage is what I call the permeable membrane phase. In this early stage, you still feel a sense of pride in your empathy. You are the go-to person. You feel energized initially by being needed. However, you begin to notice somatic symptoms. Modern neuroscience tells us that the body keeps the score before the mind admits the defeat. You might experience sudden headaches after social interactions, a heaviness in the limbs, or a vague, unplaceable anxiety that vanishes when you are alone. You brush these off. You tell yourself you are just tired. But in the Jungian view, these are the first tremors of the unconscious. Your psyche is signaling that the container is full. You are taking in more emotional data than you can process, and the residue is beginning to clog your intuitive channels. You are not yet angry, but you are becoming heavy. The water is rising, and then comes the second stage, the resentment feedback loop. The water has breached the hull. Here, the nice person mask begins to slip, but only in the privacy of your own mind. You begin to develop a secret, cynical commentary track. While you are nodding compassionately at your friend's recurring drama, your internal monologue is screaming, "Why don't you just leave him?" Or, "You are doing this to yourself." This dissonance creates a massive neurochemical conflict. Your mirror neurons are trying to connect, but your prefrontal cortex, the logical commander, is judging the inefficiency of the interaction. You start to view your loved ones not as people, but as energy vampires. Jung would say your shadow is projecting its own repressed selfishness onto them. You see them as takers because you have repressed your own ability to take. You resent their freedom to be messy because you have imprisoned yourself in the cage of being the stable one. The guilt here is corrosive. You feel like a fraud. You smile, but your eyes don't reach the warmth they once held. Finally, you reach the terminal stage, the empathic necrosis. This is the stage of total systemic shutdown. The shadow takes the wheel. The anger is no longer hot, it is freezing cold. You stop caring. It happens overnight. You look at the person you've supported for years and you feel absolutely nothing. No pity, no love, no anger, just a vast, arid desert of indifference. This is the door slam many sensitive people are famous for. It isn't a tantrum, it's a survival mechanism. Your brain's limbic system, having been overstimulated for too long, initiates a hard reset. It desensitizes you to the source of the pain. In Jungian terms, the libido, the psychic energy, has withdrawn entirely from the object. You haven't just set a boundary, you have annihilated the connection. While this saves you, it often leaves a trail of destruction in your relationships, confirming your deepest fear, that you are, at your core, cold and unlovable. But here is the twist, the secret that Jung spent his life trying to teach us. This coldness, this hidden rage, it is not your failure. It is your salvation. It is the raw material for your individuation, the process of becoming a truly whole human being. You have been trying to cure your anger by suppressing it, by trying to be better. Jung would tell you that you are looking in the wrong direction. You do not need more light. You need to learn how to metabolize the dark. You must integrate the shadow aggressor. This sounds counterintuitive. Why would an empath want to integrate aggression? Because empathy without the capacity for aggression is not kindness. It is submission. True compassion requires teeth. If you cannot bite, your gentleness is not a choice, it is a lack of options. Jung argued that a harmless man is not a good man. A good man is a dangerous man who has his danger under voluntary control. To heal the empath's anger, we must employ a technique I call the obsidian shield. This is not about building a wall to keep people out. Walls keep you trapped inside just as much as they keep others out. A shield is a tool you pick up and put down. The first step of this technique involves a radical shift in your internal neurology. You must move from absorption to observation. When you are listening to someone's pain, you are currently operating in a state of unconscious identification. You are merging with them. You must consciously engage your observer self. Imagine you are a scientist behind a thick pane of glass, obsidian glass. You can see the subject, you can hear them, you can understand their data, but the air in your room remains your own. You are not breathing their smoke. Modern neuroscience supports this shift. By consciously labeling the emotions you are witnessing, he is feeling sad rather than I feel sad. You shift activity from the amygdala, the fear center, to the right ventrolateral prefrontal cortex, which governs emotional regulation. You are literally rewiring your brain to process empathy as information, not as physical trauma. But the mental shift is not enough. You must also engage in what Jung called active imagination to negotiate with your shadow. You must give your anger a voice before it screams. When you feel that first flicker of irritation, that stage 2 resentment, do not swallow it. Acknowledge it. Validate it. Say to yourself, I am angry because my energy is being stolen. My anger is the guardian of my resources. By acknowledging the anger consciously, you deflate the shadow's power. The pressure valve opens. You can then respond to the person not with an explosion, but with a firm, grounded truth. You can say, I can see you are hurting, but I am at my limit right now and cannot listen anymore. That sentence is terrifying to the unintegrated empath. You fear it will destroy the relationship, but this is the paradox of the boundary. When you respect your own limits, others begin to respect them too. When you stop playing the role of the infinite martyr, the people around you are forced to stop playing the role of the helpless victim. You force them to carry their own shadow, which is the greatest gift you can actually give them. By carrying everyone else's burden, you are stealing their opportunity to grow. You are enabling their weakness to validate your own strength. Jung warned against this inflation of the ego, thinking you are the only one who can save them. You are not a god. You are a finite biological entity. This integration requires you to accept a painful truth. You are not always nice. And that is okay. The goal of the Jungian path is not to be a saint, it is to be authentic. The nice person is a persona, a two-dimensional cardboard cutout that blows away in the storm. The authentic person is three three-dimensional, casting a shadow, taking up space, capable of saying no with the same conviction as they say yes. When you integrate the hidden anger, it transforms. It stops being a volatile, explosive rage and alchemizes into assertive vitality. It becomes the fuel that allows you to pursue your own passions, to protect your time, to build a life that is yours, not just a support structure for everyone else. This is the evolution of consciousness. The empath is not a victim of a cruel world. The empath is a prototype of a new kind of human, one that can sense the collective web but must learn to stand as an individual pillar within it. The anger you feel is the growing pains of this evolution. It is your soul demanding that you graduate from the herd mentality of unconscious merging and step into the terrifying, exhilarating responsibility of selfhood. However, there is one final crucial piece to this puzzle, a realization that sits at the very bottom of the alchemical vessel. It is the concept of the golden shadow. Jung suggested that we do not only repress our darkness, we also repress our highest potential. We push our greatness into the shadow because we are afraid of the power it holds. Your anger often points to where your passion lies buried. The things that trigger your rage are often the things that violate your deepest values. If you are enraged by injustice, it is because you have the capacity for great leadership. If you are enraged by cruelty, it is because you have the capacity for profound protection. Your anger is a map. It is showing you exactly where you need to pour your energy, not to destroy, but to create. So, how do you walk this path tomorrow? How do you face the friend who drains you, the partner who demands too much, the world that screams for your attention? You do not run away. You do not numb yourself. You stand your ground, feeling the heat of your own fire, and you realize that this fire is not there to burn you alive. It is there to forge you. You begin to practice what I term benevolent ruthlessness. This is the ability to cut the cord when necessary, not out of hate, but out of a fierce love for the sanctity of your own soul. You realize that your first duty is to the integrity of your own psyche. If your house is burning down, you cannot offer shelter to anyone else. The journey from the exhausted, resentful empath to the integrated, powerful mystic is not an easy one. It requires you to face the parts of yourself you have spent a lifetime running from. It requires you to look in the mirror and see the wolf staring back at you, and instead of flinching, you nod. You accept the wolf, you welcome him into the pack, because you will need him. The world is dark, and the night is long, and the sheep cannot survive without the wolf's teeth. You must understand that this transformation, this solidification of your spirit, will change who surrounds you. As you withdraw your projection of the savior, those who needed a savior will fall away. The energy vampires, the eternal victims, the emotional tourists. They will find your new boundaries repulsive. They will call you changed. They will say you have become hard. Let them. This shedding of skins is the natural consequence of psychic maturation. You are no longer a child seeking approval. You are an adult seeking reality. The loneliness you may feel during this transition is not isolation. It is solitude. It is the sacred space required for your ego to recalibrate its magnetic field. You are clearing the static interference so you can finally hear your own frequency. Jung believed that the individual who withdraws from the collective madness to find their own soul is doing a service to the world. By refusing to participate in the unconscious emotional churning of your environment, you become an anchor. You stop adding to the chaos. You become a point of stillness in a turning world. So the next time that dark, hidden anger rises in your throat, do not swallow it, do not fear it. Greet it with the respect due to a fierce guardian. It is the voice of your ancestors, the growl of your biology, and the whisper of your future self, all converging to tell you one thing: you are valuable enough to be protected. Your empathy is a superpower, yes, but a superpower without a control switch is just a meltdown waiting to happen. You have spent your life mastering the art of feeling others. Now it is time to master the art of feeling yourself. The shadow is not your enemy. The shadow is the fuel. And you are the engine. Drive carefully. See you in the next dimension.